Good afternoon. So I lowered the volume for a minute because there are two quick points that I need to emphasize. Hopefully, you still my audience they still have patience to listen. So, but it's fresh. I mean, not all video, just from now. You get it online. Regarding the music and regarding the titans and the social workers. So let's start with the second one. What I've described, the systematic abuse of the titans, this abuse is, of course, it should be said. I mean, if it's not clear that it's just one small part of all the cruelties that they suffered in Israel, and many other aspects are described in this channel. So I mean, just if you're really interested, just watch the videos. And it should be said, it should be emphasized that these things, the people that suffer those things, I mean, in some way they were similar to me, and many actually looked similar to me, or even just like me. It doesn't really matter why now, it's complicated. And they lived in Israel throughout, from the beginning of the 20th century. The issue of why quite a bit look like me is, I discussed this in the robot saga. I mean, it's complicated, but just to say, I mean, there were people like me, even though not exactly like me. Probably they were less resistant to all sorts of physical abuse, because it's not the same species. But even more than that, it should be said, these people that lived throughout the 20th century, they didn't have even a shred of the privileges that I received during my childhood and and while I was, I would say, teenager. Even though I suffered even as a child, I mean, because this torture started when you were born. This torture started when you were born in Israel. But my childhood was not, I mean, it wasn't typical to, I mean, the Titan males, I mean, throughout the 20th century. Most of them grew up in families that were, I mean, far less means, and many grew up in kibbutz, like in communal societies, and I'm not sure that they even have like adaptive parents. Maybe because it was at the time, it was, I mean, for some time, it was, for quite a bit of time, it was customary to grow up like even if you had parents, like most people had, they grew up in with other children, and so it should be said, many times they had nobody, really nobody, besides, I mean, the people of the establishment that were their main torturers since they were born. And for certain, I mean, all of them, or just, I cannot be sure that all of them, but I mean, for certain, the great majority, they had tremendously less education than I have. Tremendously less. And of course, they couldn't even think about things like I mean, you know, maybe I'll inform like international, like, you know, international bodies with my situation. I mean, it doesn't work even for me. You know, I do it for so many years and nobody cares. I mean, you just care when you start to hear the music. But I mean, they didn't even. I mean, it's improbable that they even had such a thought that it couldn't include in their mind, because I mean, just think about it. People, they have nobody. I mean, the only people that they have are the people that actually torture them. So of course, I mean, they cannot do anything at all. They cannot do anything at all, and they were incriminated, and I mean, and lived short life, and should remember that on top of everything, there is the issue of like they take their immune system from them using the bicycle mechanism. They use them like as organ donors without their. I mean, people do it in the street like without problem, and it's like that since the beginning of the 20th century. The torture is without end, and it was always predicated on the fact that, I mean, you cannot speak about it. That, I mean, it's mandated by the Israeli security services, and nobody's allowed to speak about it, like, I mean, only just by in clues, in, like, you know, and that's why the Israelis have, like, a widely known, I mean, sign language, that, I mean, so many people in Israel know, like, I mean, the signs that, that with regard to the torturing and subjugation of the Titans, because it's basically the same that throughout the 20th century. I mean, more than 100 years. It's not something that, I mean, very complicated. You know, no high tech here. So they were tortured and incriminated and suffered tremendously from the authorities, and were raped and lived short life, cruel life, and many committed suicide. To a point that the Israelis invented a narrative that was common in Israel for some time, that there is like a problem in the mind of the Titans males, that, I mean, they all commit suicide at some point. Maybe they are even programmed to do so, presumably. Believe it or not, it was very common in Israel. Today, I don't know if it's still common, because today some people don't even know that there is like a difference between Titan male and female. I mean, there is such an ignorance today. But suicide was incredibly common. Of course, my older brother committed suicide in his late 20s. And this is kind of like, I mean, this is a standard. This is a standard. They were tortured and abused in any possible way. Of course, almost all of them served in the IDF. I mean, then, of course, they fought in the various wars of Israel. Of course, always used, you know, to the most dangerous missions. Of course, many died in battle because and mostly they didn't have anybody to speak with. Like, I mean, even I'm so, I mean, tremendously more educated, and also I'm not the same species. Like, so I have more like my biology is more resistant, and also but tremendously more educated, and like from early childhood than these people. And I still, I mean, I cannot speak with anybody about it without being afraid of, like, to be hospitalized in mental asylum. And this was like, I mean, this was the standard. I mean, to say that all of them at some point of their life was hospitalized in mental institution is like, I mean, of course, all of them spent time in jail, all of them. And you need to understand something. If a person like myself found himself in this place, in a room, in like a dirty room, in a dirty hostel for homeless people, under house arrest for a long time, without money, and without the ability to even see his daughters, if the people of Israel have done it to me, they can do it almost to anybody. Almost to anybody. You need to understand, I grew up in one of the most, we were not rich, but we lived in a very high society neighborhood since I was born, and I grew up among rich people and very educated people, and I served in the military, like like as an officer in intelligence unit that is, I mean, that in kind of like, I mean, I would say a path that, I mean, is mostly reserved to the higher classes of society. And I studied in the university, like, I mean, in the Hebrew University, in maybe the most prestigious, I mean, one of the most prestigious, I mean, bachelor degrees that you can do in Israel, if not the most. Why am I saying it? Because I had tremendous privileges. These people, and yet, after a long war of the state against me, a long war of attrition of every system of the state against me, yes, even to such a person, they can still do it to him. They can still torture him without end until he finds himself. And of course, I mean, you have no, there is no, the law does not apply to you. The police torture you. I mean, everybody is against you all the time. So even a person like myself with such a background, I mean, it's a fact that he can find himself in a home, without any, I mean, he cannot see his daughters and without money at all. And regarding money, it should be said that I also had privileges that, I mean, my parents supported me not only during childhood, but even but much later than that. And it was not true to any Titan. I mean, not to any, but to most of them. And my profession is that of software engineer, which is very, is characterized by very high salaries in Israel, very, very high salaries. So I have very high, I would say, at least on paper, the ability to, very high, I would say, ability to, I would say, work, as a higher person because of the profession, because of this profession. I mean, at some time during my life, I understood that I cannot really do it because, my communication is blocked by the Shabak, and they manipulate me to work whatever they want, and every time, people just abuse me and torture me. But at least on paper, I have this kind of a skill that if I didn't have daughters, I would have left Israel long ago, and I could work in the United States or in other places as a software engineer and with very high salary. And all of this of course, it was, not true to almost any of them, and not even close to be true to that. It's completely different. And even to such a person with these privileges and this background, and this education, and this family, even such a person, after the state fights him for so long, yes, he found himself here, in this place, in a hostel for homeless people, poor and detached from his daughters. Eventually, the state, the Leviathan that is the state, eventually it defeats anybody. But if it defeated me, and I found myself here, you can be sure that for the great majority of the Titan males in the history of Israel, it was a regular thing for them to be under arrest, to be, to spend time in jail, to spend time in hostels for homelessness. It was, to spend time in mental asylum. This was standard for them, and they reached these places much earlier than I fought until I was almost 40, and I'm almost 40 now. You can be sure that for them, they made the age when this thing started to happen was 20 or something like that. Because they had so much less ability to actually fight the state, and no resources at all. They were so poor and vulnerable, and more than and they couldn't even speak. It was not allowed to speak about the truth of the reality, because, and this is still true. The first time you speak about it in public, you see, I can only speak to the world, to YouTube and to Facebook, and even that was used eventually against me by the social workers of Shoam to separate me from my daughters, and to forcibly take me for psychiatric examination. Even that. But I cannot speak about it with anybody, any in person, because I know that immediately I will be taken to will be placed in a mental asylum. Forcibly. And that's what the Israelis always wanted to do to me, because then they can just take my flesh and blood from me without any with regard to any kind of human consideration. And this torture is still going on, and it's like that since the beginning of the 20th century, and nobody cares at all. And if someone cares, from the international community, it seems that the only question that they have in their mind is, are these people gay? Is it true that they are gay? It's incredibly interesting to know if the aliens are gay, are homosexuals. This was the most important question since forever. Not only in our time with LGBTQ, whatever is so common. No, it was always the main question, because the people that asked the question was people of the intelligence agencies, and they were always, throughout the 20th century, many of them were homosexuals and pedophiles. So this was always the main issue, and it's still the main issue. More than 100 years of torture, unimaginable torture of innocent people without any support, without protection from the law, without even the ability to speak about the circumstances of the reality. And if people from outside of Israel show interest in what's going on, it's only one question: are they homosexuals? And this question seems that it never got like a Victorian answer. I mean, there is no answer that will stop this. I mean, this interest. It's like, I mean, it's a constant. I mean, question. For some reason. Don't be mistaken. Every intelligent cell that surrounded me during my life, and there were so many of those, like the one here, but anywhere, this was their main, I mean, objective, to prove that they are homosexual and to do everything they can to prove it. Of course, how do you prove it? Using violence and sexual abuse. Of course, I mean, that's the way to prove a person is homosexual. It's known that this is the way. Yes. And there's nothing new about it. This was always the way. This has been the way since the beginning of the 20th century. And yes, most of them, many of them, all of them died very early. And again, these people can live up to several hundred years. Their lifespan is not that of human. They can live to several hundred years. But they were mostly committed suicide when they were 20-something or 30-something or 40-something at best. No one lived even to 80 or 90. No one. And they can live to 400. But, I mean, how much can you fight the state that, I mean, doing everything that to crush you? How much can you fight them? And again, I would say the ability that I had to fight the state is probably tremendously more than any of them, or at least more than the majority of them, because of education and mostly education, but also intelligence, and also, I mean, my belief in God, which is in itself a grace of God. And I mean, maybe they didn't have this grace of God because the belief in self is I mean, many times it is a product of the grace of God. And they didn't have the powers. They didn't have the profession. I mean, they didn't have the ability to be hired to, I mean, to all sort of high-paid job. They didn't have anything remotely like that, and they didn't have families even not adopted families many times. And this torture is standard in Israel for a long time, and nobody about cares even a little bit. And if they do, there is only one question that is in their mind: is it true that the Israelis are homosexuals? This is the only question. This is the only question. Now, a second issue regarding the music that you now hear. So I should emphasize, there is nothing new about it. Yes, now they use smartphone for it, but not only smartphone. It was played in any of the offices where I worked. I mean, I replayed like a video from 18 months ago or 17 months ago, where I discussed in briefly Hermetic, Bright Source Energy, and my heritage companies, the IT companies that I worked for. All was American heads, which means that American companies that were financed by the American intelligence, and specifically financed in order to be, I mean, my guards, because I need guards. In everywhere I worked, there was a constant, I mean, golden earring, constant music, subliminal music like that. Always. And it was all financed by the Americans. And this is not, first of all, there is nothing new about it. It was common, I mean, it was very common since in the 1980s, and probably much before. This is the known issue. It's a known weapon in intelligence circles. Everybody inside the intelligence circles, I mean, everywhere know about it. Of course, I didn't know about it until very late, because I do not belong to any intelligence agency. But people of the intelligence agencies of the world, they know about it very well. It's nothing new about it. Nothing new about it. And it should be said that it affects people that are around you, unless you are using headphones. If you don't use headphones, it affects people around you. So everywhere I worked, people, I mean, very short, I mean, I will always move between offices. I didn't understand why. I mean, I'm not stinking. I mean, I'm quite a nice person. I mean, I'm not like yelling, and I'm helpful to my surrounding. But I mean, for all sorts of reasons that I didn't understand at the time, I mean, people always I was kind of like a leper. I mean, of course, because they felt it as well, and they knew, I mean, why it's there, because they were all heads. They were all people of the intelligence agencies, so they knew that the music plays. So they did whatever they want to be out, to keep like out of, I mean, just, I will not be like near them. This was true in MyHeritage, this was true in Hermetic, this was true in Bright Source Energy. This was true everywhere I worked. All the American heads companies play this all the time and always manipulated me that I mean, to change the office, so I mean, I will not be close to people. So they will not be affected by it. Especially because they knew what it is. I mean, they knew that they are affected. I didn't know that I'm affected by it. But I mean, they understood what's going on. Because it's a very common tool. And of course, when it was played constantly, I mean, during my sleep, and at some point my wife couldn't like even sleep at the same time, same bed with me. I mean, we only had sex like on the same bed, but then I mean, I went to another room because she couldn't stand the music, and she knew what's going on. And since she's a slave of the Shabbat, she knew about it, but she couldn't tell me about it. But I mean, she did everything. Very early she did everything that she can. I mean, not to sleep in the same room as I am because of the music. And it should be said that I raised my children in joint custody. And at least, I mean, and since they were born, and the music always played. At first, I mean, it was always in our apartment. I mean, they are subjected to it since they were born. Yes, babies. Babies are, I mean, babies were and are subjected to this torture that you now suffer as a routinely thing in Israel. Since they were born, innocent angels are suffering this torture since they are born in Israel. And of course, needless to say, I'm always under this torture wherever I am, without, I mean, you know, without trial, without any way to object to it, because it's not only from the smartphone. It's easily installed. I mean, only very late. I mean, in the history of this abuse, I mean, it was started. I mean, to mainly, I mean, be installed like a secret app in phones. But I mean, mostly, I mean, the Shabak just installed it in your home, and you cannot do anything about it. You cannot, like, I mean, or in the office, you cannot do anything about it. The smartphone is just, I mean, only another device that can always play it. So no, the music is not going to stop, and I assure you it will be louder, because the bicycle mechanism, or in the language of the Neros, allows to make it louder. So it will be louder. So it will be louder. It will be louder until the ego is softened enough. And I assure you, the ego will be softened enough. No matter how much you are, how important you are, if you are the richest person on earth, if you are the ruler of the strongest country on earth, I assure you, the cherubs dealt with people that are of higher importance than you already, without much fuss. No matter how important you think you are, whoever you are, I assure you, the cherubs have seen people like you million years ago. And they know exactly what to do in order to soften the ego, until the ego is soft enough and the correct button will be pressed. And when I will see the mushroom in Tel Aviv, I will stop the music, not a moment before.